Alright guys, so it's Tuesday morning as I record this. Now, those of you following the channel at the end of last week, on Friday, just a few days ago now, some big, pretty scary, pretty upsetting news came out that ArenaNet had actually been going through serious money troubles. NCSoft has moved into Intercept, and up to 25% of the studio was said to be getting laid off. Now, last I talked to you guys about this on a video was on Friday. You're welcome to watch that if you like for more information on the background of this. The devs kind of had to sit over the weekend not knowing whether they'd have their job, and now Monday has just passed where they have been delivered their news. So on that previous production, I did say I'd keep you in the loop, and well, that's what I want to do here, as we do have more concrete numbers on what has been affected about Guild Wars 2, who is staying and who is leaving. Now, honestly, this could end up quite a tacky video. I don't want this to turn into a thing where we sit down, look at a list of devs, and judge how important we on the outside of the studio deem them to have potentially been, and, you know, potentially give some devs further kicks on their way out as they go through this real life turbulence. I don't want to do that so much, but I do want to let you all know the details of what's going on, because it is quite important. Now, one factor first of all, as we go into this video, something I didn't report on Friday, but maybe should have. One of these third-party websites, obviously the original article broke on Kotaku, but one of these other websites, I believe, got an interview with ArenaNet, or a statement from them, where a comment was made that the Guild Wars 2 game service supposedly would not be affected. Now, that was a statement that was out there on Friday. Now, when I did my video, I never mentioned that. I laid down several speculations as to why Guild Wars 2 probably wouldn't be affected, that this seemed to be more about ArenaNet's unannounced projects, of which we have no idea what was going on with them, seemed to be in development hell, down to managerial incompetence or whatever you like. The fact was that this 25% that was getting laid off maybe wouldn't affect Guild Wars 2 too much. Now, my comments there already were fairly optimistic. I think the truth of the situation is Guild Wars 2 has been affected by those projects for many years now, as talent has been taken from the main game, the live experience, Guild Wars 2, and pushed into R&D and development on these other things that never ended up turning into anything. So, the news on Friday of these layoffs kind of is confirmation of bad news we'd already been experiencing, rather than bad news all in of itself, if you can keep with me. The idea being, oh, the reason we have so few World vs. World developers for so long is because of these other projects, and now it's just been laid bare to the public. So there's kind of two discussions going on. One is the layoffs, the other is people aggrieved to hear that ArenaNet dared to pursue research and development into other projects that wasn't to do with their main game. So all of that aside, the key piece of information is that ArenaNet themselves, beyond even just, you know, common sense speculation I'd offered on Friday, ArenaNet themselves had even said the Guild Wars 2 game service shouldn't be affected, and people really clung to that over the whole weekend. That means that the news we just got on Monday can be quite hard to swallow, when in fact many recognizable developers who have been public faces, even quite recently, we know, dealing with Guild Wars 2 updates, Living World Season 4 updates and thereabouts, festival updates over the most recent year, have in fact been laid off. So yes, it may be true that many of these devs are right here today, having just been put onto these unannounced projects, but the truth is, they all have a lot to say in veteran positions to do with the main franchise too, and it might be hard to believe that Guild Wars 2 won't be affected at all. So when we get to the list of names themselves, that will become clear. The other thing I want to say as well is this little update that ArenaNet threw out on Monday. Obviously, today's Tuesday. Normally on a Tuesday, I'd be getting ready to talk to you about balance updates or, you know, whatever they've thrown into the game in terms of a new patch. This one was scheduled to be the Warclaw. You rewind the clock just 7 days, and you'll find an excited video from me, or sort of excited, talking about a World versus World mount. And, well, that's not going to be happening, obviously. This big news has affected the studio, and the devs have basically been told, look, you don't have to do any work, don't worry about it. We'll get through this much more important thing. So, a delay. Check it out. The ArenaNet team, last week, we announced the upcoming release of our new World vs. World mount, the Warclaw. Unfortunately, this release will be delayed until Tuesday, March the 5th. In light of current events at the studio, we're taking this time to focus on our friends and colleagues. We hope you understand, and we apologize for this delay. Thank you for your continued support of Guild Wars 2. So this patch actually being pushed back A lot further than when I think they originally wanted to have it out. Obviously, they had the whole thing with inclement weather earlier in the month too, and so maybe a bit disappointing, but probably to be expected. In fact, I think the internet in general has been quite sympathetic to this pushed back delay. It's not often I see the Guild Wars 2 community be sympathetic to a delay, but on this instance, there's nary a whisper from someone, you know, infuriated about it. There's much more important and interesting stuff to talk about, I suppose. So let's get into the cuts that were made. First, let's open with this tweet from Samantha here, who is an ArenaNet developer. Her Twitter handle describes her as a writer of games. She was from Mass Effect Andromeda, SWOTOR, and now is at Guild Wars 2. And she says, I still have my job, but over 100 amazing people don't. This is one of the main tweets we have to know just how many people lost their jobs. And it's funny because 100 is a big number. The list I'm about to give you of developers we know who have lost their job isn't anywhere near 100. So I don't know what that means really. The substantial number of them really were sort of back of room devs that aren't public facing because they've been working on these other projects for so long. But yeah, so over 100. If you remember my comment from the Friday video, they have about 400 people at the studio, so that's about 25% of them getting laid off. But it still leaves them with 300. Now, 300 is a huge amount of people. When Guild Wars 2 released, they did that with about a team of 300, if I remember that was around the number there. So it's not necessarily doom and gloom for Guild Wars 2. One thing that's still a little bit unclear, and I wonder what your guys' take on it is, has NCSoft swept in and told ArenaNet it can't do anything except Guild Wars anymore? Some people seem to believe that, and of those people, many think that's an amazing thing. 300 devs dedicated to Guild Wars 2 might even be more than we've seen in recent years, and it could spell good things for Guild Wars 2. I mean, that's a pretty optimistic thing, but I somehow doubt that. I'm sure ArenaNet can't exist as a one-game show forever. I'm sure that the company and even NCSoft needs to understand they should pursue other ideas. There must be some people on other projects somewhere, whether they're the same ones that have been in development hell for, you know, the past 5-6 years, who knows? But I can't imagine NCSoft has told them to lay off everyone working on anything else and focus 100% on Guild Wars 2. So that's kind of a curious element of this, but they've got 300 to work with, it seems, from this statement here of 100 people who lost their jobs. So, of the 100 employees, we have a list here from Reddit user Zarura, who did an amazing job compiling a list of all the known departures from ArenaNet. Now, where most of this information comes from is Twitter. Twitter really blew up over the event of this. There's a hashtag where people have been talking about their favorite memories of the franchise and stuff and trying to console the various devs that have lost their jobs. And most of them are announcing to the public that they've lost their positions through there. There are a couple of other websites and places people have heard, like ArenaNet Pool came to a live stream and announced their departure. That would be one of the raid designers, I think, or at least historically at one point, a raid designer. We also have LinkedIn, I think, is being used as a source on some of these. But the full list of laid off that we know at this point, and seems to be for a while, is actually only 20 devs. So only a fifth of the total 100 or so, leaving, you know, at least 80 on other projects that we know nothing about. I think the assumption here, guys, is that every single name on this list right here was right now not working on Guild Wars 2. They may have had very recent works on Guild Wars 2, and they may have had a lot of expertise and understanding of the Guild Wars IP, but at this moment, they were on other projects, and thus they were on the chopping block. Now, that's just the community supposition. I'm a little bit cynical of, because some of the names on this list know so much about Guild Wars 2, it would seem really weird for the devs to arbitrarily lay them off just because they happen to this month be on an unannounced project when they have such a, you know, massive backlog of other things. But hey, it's what we've got to work with now. Also, for what it's worth, at the bottom, Zarura does have some other information, confirmations of people saying, and some unknown positions, which we'll look into in a second. So here are the people. Now, the Reddit has basically given a dedicated thread to almost every single one of these developers, some larger than others, depending on how publicly well known they were. And remember, just because you've heard of a dev, it doesn't mean all the successes of what that dev did rest squarely on their shoulders. There's going to be a lot of incredibly talented people we never heard of at all, and who don't have significant online social media presences tied to their work, and maybe for good reason, given some of the controversies we've seen with other devs over the years, right? So try not to be too upset, I guess, if we see names we recognize. But nonetheless, a lot of these will be hard pills to swallow, so let's jump in. I want to read these names out. Again, I don't want to do some tacky, weird review where I try to qualify how worthwhile this person was, when frankly, as an outsider to the studio, what the hell do I know? And that goes for pretty much anyone out here in the community. But nonetheless, we've got Aaron Lind, first of all, who was said to be a narrative systems lead. Not sure entirely what that entails. It's not a name that jumped off the page to me. I will say they're quite interesting in that if you look at their tweets, this was a decision to lead. Well, I spent the weekend thinking about it, and I've decided I'm going to be leaving ArenaNet. Really tough decision. I adore these people, and I'll miss them so. Aaron isn't alone in this. It does seem that several people, particularly those in more senior positions, might have made the decision to leave rather than being forced out, as it were. You know, like the opportunity was made to be known to them, and do they decide to take it? And the reason I say maybe in more senior positions is the theory here, and again, this feels so wrong to speculate about, but the theory here is if you're a senior developer, you take more money, and thus if you fall on your sword deliberately, so it were, you save the jobs of more of your colleagues, people who draw smaller salaries. Now, obviously, there's all kinds of complexities in that. People are paid a lot of money in senior positions because they, you know, have irreplaceable insights into where the company's been, where the products are going over a long time. You can't just chop off the heads of all those in senior positions and let the company be run by new talent. That could be a particularly dangerous thing, right? So there's a lot of that discussion going on around this as well. I guess I'll just leave the premise at the door there without going further. So second on the list, we have Benjamin Arnold. So it's one of the Bens. Don't forget, there are many ArenaNet Bens that even myself have conflated into one person at times. But this is one of the bigger Bens, perhaps the most famous of Bens. This is Fractal Ben. So this is the Ben that would often get on the developer AMAs and even just contribute to random discussions outside of major release windows to do with fractal instabilities, the future of fractals, and so on. People, you know, credit a lot of the beauty of the CMs, the challenge modes, and a lot of the future direction of challenging 5-man content to Benjamin Arnold, and yes, he has been confirmed to be leaving. So this is probably one of the bigger ones people are discussing more, and people feel very deflated if Fractals is like their main thing seeing this guy leave. Next, we have Cameron Rich. Again, I don't want to do a big review of everyone. We've got Cameron Rich, game designer, also on Fractals and to do with raids. We've got Casey Benson, a tools programmer. Connie Griffith, a senior game designer. This one I was particularly sad to see, I must say. Connie had some really valuable insights on AMAs. This was a dev that whenever they made a post, I was like furiously nodding to, and I was like, this person really understands what's going on and what needs to be done. I think was actually vouched for in a recent big AMA by Mo himself, who said, you know, this person worked on some difficult Path of Fire stuff. So that one stung for me to see. We got Drew Cady. This is a guy on the audio team, and I don't think will draw that much sympathy from the broader community. But nonetheless, Drew will have had a very big effect on the soundscapes of the game. And, you know, it's a very recognizable name, I would say, because they've just been so fun whenever they were on different live streams showing off how they get various sound effects out of different items. It was always a good laugh whenever they brought them onto Guild Chat, or even some productions predating Guild Chat. McLean Deemer, who is responsible for a lot of the music in the game, obviously, does seem to still have his seat and did an incredible tweet chain. I mean, look at this. Here, I'll actually show you guys. McLean just talking about Drew for so long, all these messages. Feel free to pause the video on all his memories of Drew and all the incredible things that Drew did at the company over the years. It just gives you a real insight into how much many of the employees that even kept their jobs are going to be affected by this, because they're longtime friends and colleagues they'll no longer be able to work with. So it's a real shame. I must admit that on Friday, when I heard of these layoffs, I did immediately think of the audio team, because they've always seemed very well funded and stuff. They got their own Foley room and they seem to do really cool stuff. And I don't know, it feels like one of the things an executive decision might be to cut back on. A real shame, and in fact, somewhat confirmed by this tweet from McLean, who says, yeah, it's brutal not knowing who's affected, but even just the studio audio team lost 3 people, and he says they were only a small team. So maybe my impression of how well staffed they were software is totally off. But yeah, they did have pretty significant cuts, Drew being one of them, it seems. Next is Ellen Stimmel, a narrative writer, and she here says, I've been wondering what to say, but the reality is that I'm still processing what's happened at ArenaNet. I know I would like to land on my feet sooner rather than later. I hope to find a job with others who worked at ArenaNet, and I hope that job pays for its employees' parking. So wait, is that a thing? ArenaNet employees didn't get to pay for their parking? But yeah, so I can't say that that's a name I recognize too much of. I'm very sad to say, but maybe this was on one of the other projects. We've got Evan Takira. I've never known how to say his name. So customer service leave. Evan I've actually spoken to him multiple times before. He's a well-known face for me, but I'm not sure too much for anyone else. He says, sad news, friends. Today was my final day at ArenaNet. I will miss the people, the project, and the unbelievable stories written over the past year and past 8 years, but I leave with the confidence that Guild Wars 2 is still in the hands of some unbelievably talented people. So that's an unfortunate one, as unfortunate as any of the others. So next on the list is a very recognizable name. We have Gail Gray, an extremely senior employee, forum communications team lead. So any Guild Wars 1 fans watching me in my video right now, this will probably be the name that sticks out to any of us. Gail is like literally one of the original employees at the company, a very old timer. So she was also very well known, interfaced a lot with the community during the Guild Wars 1 days. This is the famous Gail with the frog, the unique mini pet in Guild Wars 1. Then she kind of stepped away a bit during the early Guild Wars 2 days, but came back, has been operating on the forums very heavily for a long time with Guild Wars 2, and I guess she's actually on the chopping block. So this is, to me, one of those incredible names that's like, wow, you just don't expect this person to end up leaving ArenaNet. And here it is. She says, I'm sad to tell you that I'm no longer an employee of ArenaNet. It's been a wonderful 18 plus years, and I've appreciated every one of those years and every single one of the friends I made through the game. I wish everyone at ArenaNet a fantastic future. I love you all. And she also put a post up on the forums themselves, which obviously many devs didn't do, but as you know, someone that was on the forums a lot, I guess she felt to do that. So really incredible to see Gail stepping away there. One of the ones that leaves your mouth slightly open. Next on the list, Grant Gertz, a producer, World vs. World, PvP, and Fractals. So I was hoping to see nothing related to World vs. World or PvP on this list, personally. You know, already starved areas of Guild Wars 2 development that you don't want to get hit any further. But the truth is, maybe, you know, these things they haven't worked on for a long time, and that's the idea. But here's what Grant says. Sad to say that today is my last day at ArenaNet. It was a fantastic experience, and I learned a tremendous amount during my time here. I'm looking for my next great adventure. Another huge name now, Josh Forman, environmental artist and art lead, Jumping Puzzles, Super Adventure Box. So, in parentheses is obviously what the Redditor is noted, what they did. So, Josh, yes, another very public dev, not necessarily throughout the Path of Fire days, I would say. The last we were really hearing a lot about him, I think, personally, was like with the Chalice of Tears and stuff. I'm not saying that's the last work he did on Guild Wars 2, but the last time we really heard a lot from him. Though, obviously, he's been on the occasional guild chat and so on. This is a man that came to fame for his work hiding hidden golden coins around various maps in Guild Wars 2, designing the Mad King's Clock Tower, a notoriously difficult jumping puzzle, at least for when it came out. You know, the first Halloween we saw that, and players weren't very good at jumping puzzles and stuff at that time. And of course, one of the leads, main guys behind the entire idea of Super Adventure Box, which of course has been on hiatus for years, but with Josh leaving, that's kind of like, you know, you might say the nail was already in the coffin for Super Adventure Box, but if there was ever any hope for maybe 1 year World 3 and 4 being finished, it would probably be under his eyesight, right? You'd think, hopefully. But now, I don't know, man. So, I mean, Josh is a very outspoken, very well-known member of the team, so it feels like a big loss. Josh actually streams a lot in his own time, and you can see he's a very ambitious guy with lots of passions about different projects and things. So I'm kind of hopeful that he'll fall on his feet here. His tweet says, 15 years is a hell of a run in the video games industry. Happy trails to those who remain. I'll be following your work, and I know I'll be proud of what you accomplished. To my fellow refugees, we've always been like family at ArenaNet, and chances are we'll be working together again. And he has the classiest, most stylish exit here with the image of the, you know, the jumper slung over his shoulder as he leaves through their lobby there. But yes, so that one definitely provoked a hell of a reaction from people. I think most people are selfishly just thinking of the SAB side of things, but I think Josh probably contributed a lot. Now, supposedly, he does run a Patreon for his personal stuff. And I think he had mentioned that he was working on design stuff recently, which he wasn't necessarily as familiar with environment stuff, and it was him in that new capacity might have been why they decided to let him go here, but I feel really tacky just even speculating on that, so I guess I'll just move on. Next we got Kelsey, UI UX designer. They say, well, folks, today is my last day at ArenaNet. I want you to know that I sincerely loved coming into work day in, day out, seeing all your wonderful faces and passion. I'm sad to leave, but I look forward to seeing what you all do next. Love you all. Next, we have Lily Yu, and this is one of those names where it's like, hold on, this is a person we know was working on Guild Wars 2 a lot recently. Long live the Lich. I think they were on some streams to do with that. A star to guide us, and you're telling me that the Guild Wars 2 service isn't being affected whatsoever. This is clearly someone on a contemporary Living World team. I know that they supposedly shuffle around a little bit, and maybe Lily wasn't there anymore, but that's kind of crazy. We actually hear about Lily via Aaron here, who says, oh, and the ArenaNet narrative team suffered another loss in Lily Yu today. She doesn't have a Twitter presence, but she's an outstanding writer, and if you need, you should talk to her. So yeah, I think this is an example of probably one of the most contemporary Guild Wars 2 side people that have lost their job here. Next is McKenna Burdrow, a name you probably recognize. At least many of the other devs I recognize, having talked about McKenna plenty of times. Game designer. Now, the wiki user says to do with world versus world and world linking, but I think this is at least a year out of date now. So those of you who think that these layoffs might affect the world versus world update, maybe don't despair fully. Maybe that it won't get affected too much, but I can see this why you might be cynical about that. Next big name here as well, Matthew Medina. So, you might remember, maybe 2 years ago or so, I did a video studying the development of Tyria as a con world and its maps. And I did that video showing every iteration of a Guild Wars 2 Tyria map that we've seen so far. Like the maps that appear in-game, the alpha maps, the novel maps, the Guild Wars 1 maps, and then going even further back to like beta Guild Wars maps and E3 for everyone maps, and even before that. The reason I was able to make that video and inspired to do that video was because of Matthew Medina, a very long time ArenaNet developer who was fundamental in like the creation of Tyria itself and how it looked, and he had done these tweets of these maps and different interpretations of what they wanted Tyria to look like and moved on. Always had incredible insights, was one of the most candid and interesting people to listen to when it came to hindsight for how Heart of Thorns was handled. This was one of the guys that was pushing for maybe one day getting more Malik story into the game and, you know, finishing up on some of those untouched plot threads. They had a lot of thoughts about, definitely had a ton of passion for Guild Wars and the IP, and seems to have had the chop. Just last week, Matthew had posted a big thing on Twitter about how fortunate he felt to be working at ArenaNet and his time there over 16 years, only to find this Monday that he's lost his job. Well, folks, 16 years and 1 week was all she wrote, it seems. My journey with the ArenaNet team and Guild Wars 2 is over. Much love to everybody who's remaining. I know the franchise will be in very good hands. I'll probably be tweeting a bit more about this later, so I look forward to seeing what else he has to say on that topic. Next, we have Miranda Byrne, Senior Embedded QA. Goodbye, ArenaNet. I will miss you and always cherish our time together on to new adventures. Paul Eller, this is ArenaNet Paul on Twitch, if you've seen coming to the various streams. Game designer, raids, legendary armor work, and yes, announced that they would be leaving via that platform. We have Shuai Liu, technical director and lead server programmer. It was a privilege to have worked at ArenaNet for the last 4.5 years. To all my former colleagues, thank you for all you've done. Please reach out if there's anything that I can do. Next, we have Tyler Bierce, a name I recognize, simply game designer. They announced it via an alt on Reddit. Thanks for the call out. I appreciate the support. As of today, I'm no longer with the studio, though my departure was voluntary. My time at the studio is something I always treasure. Best of luck to the remaining dev team and fans alike. So another voluntary one there. And last of all, in alphabetical order here, I guess, via first name. Is that what we've done? Yes. We've got Zach Lute, a tools programmer, who on Twitter says, I am officially no longer an employee of ArenaNet. It's been a wonderful 6 years, and I'm truly excited to see what remaining do next with the diaspora of extraordinarily talented people brings into the world. I will always have love for ArenaNet. Now, what's next? So they have it for explicit employee names. There are some other little things we can glean, though, from Pat Kavit here. He says, I was having a a pretty okay day. Then I got an update on the whole ArenaNet layoff situation. Well, now I'm sad and angry again. They fired 2/3 of the web team, including the lead. What in the actual fuck? My only solace is that I have contracting gigs. I can get them as soon as possible if they're interested. So 2/3 of the web team supposedly haven't left. And maybe as a slight pick-me-up, there are confirmations of some people staying, which is maybe useful. I won't read each name out individually. You guys can pause the video if you like. Some of them will be names you recognize and may indeed put a smile on your face. But obviously, you know, it's 25% of the company. There's going to be a ton of names that we recognize who are still staying. It's just these are some of the ones that have been confirmed via Twitter or wherever else. So there you go, guys. That's how the layoffs are going. I return to how I opened the video with this statement that we got on Friday that the Guild Wars 2 game service wouldn't necessarily be affected. And now here we're seeing a lot of names we do indeed recognize. With so much long-term experience with the IP and the development of the IP, you know, they may not be working on it right now, but was it the right decision? Well, I think a lot of people are questioning that. Of course, the idea that the game service won't be affected probably is technically true. They're not going to pull the servers. They're not going to, you know, cancel upcoming development. We have had it confirmed that Season 5 is still coming. Beyond Season 5, hey, who knows? I think a lot of people think that the game might be in maintenance mode after Season 5. I'm not sure that that's true. You got to think about this, guys. ArenaNet is a company that only earns money from Guild Wars. There would never be a plan to get rid of Guild Wars and to put it onto maintenance mode and cut off their only revenue stream. What will happen here is a redoubled effort on Guild Wars and make sure that that can earn as much as possible while maybe limiting their R&D into other projects, which in itself is bad news, I think. I'm very disappointed to hear that we won't be seeing anything new from ArenaNet for Christ knows how many years now as a result of this. But as far as Guild Wars is concerned, there's no rational, reasonable understanding ever why they would decide that the main game, the thing that earned them money, they're now planning to stop. This was more about the other games. And it seems like, yes, we've lost some talent on Guild Wars 2 side, but I really don't think that Season 5 is the end of the road by any stretch. They're probably going to be making plans very soon, very concrete plans, to do big things after Season 5, because they have to, otherwise the whole studio doesn't exist anymore, right? I mean, I can't imagine them just taking all this news that they've done so poorly with their other projects, that now they're just going to delete Guild Wars 2 to focus on them entirely. Come on, that's just not what's going to be happening here. So, yes, that's my take on the situation. That's the current news. I might do another video on this at some point if there's anything really concrete that comes from it. Maybe some announcements from the studio itself as the week goes along. There you have it, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll be curious to see what you say in the comments down below. Please do keep it civil, and I'll see you next time.
What do we do now?
No.